So, Season 3.
After a long absence in the DVD front, I am glad to announce that I am back. Not back into collecting Thomas DVDs, that is an era that I've unfortunately left behind, but I'll still be reviewing DVDs.
Now, if you've forgotten how this series works, and trust me, I don't blame you, then basically what I do is I review each episode one by one, and then I give the DVD a rating out of 10. It's very weird doing this without someone to do it with. I'm very used to doing collabs, so please excuse if I feel or sound a bit rusty, because it's been a year, so cut me some slack, please. But yeah, let's just get straight into it.
Kicking off Season 3, we have Tales from the Tracks. Tales from the Tracks was released initially on the 4th of June 2005 as a promotional item at the 60th anniversary party in Hatfield. It was then later publicly released 9 months later on the 20th of March 2006 by 2 Entertain. It was also reissued by Hit Entertainment in 2008, as well as essentially all of the other Hit era DVDs. The DVD contained 6 episodes, all of which being from the 8th series. It also included 4 learning segments in between the episodes and 2 songs, those being Emily and, if you want to count it, the engine roll call. First up is Thomas Gets It Right, probably the most nothing episode ever conceived. I know it's not uncommon for Hit era episodes to be uneventful, but Jesus Christ, this episode was boring. Thomas goes to get eggs and gets told to go slow, but he wants to go fast, so he goes fast and then gets told off, so he goes slow again, and everyone's happy, yay.
That's it?
The 2 things that I liked about this episode was the realistic UK weather, that was admittedly a nice change, and this weird shot of Gordon and James, which was kind of cool to look at. Yeah, that's literally it. Now, the things I like about this episode were Michelangelo's forgetting how Gordon sounds.
Cranes are airy-fairy things. They need a lot of attention, like me, in fact.
No, I will, sniffed Gordon. I'm the fastest. I'll do the most journeys.
The mere concept of eggs having little to no protection or padding, that is weird as hell and unsanitary. James undershooting the platform, that stupid prick. And now, look, I know this might be a bit redundant to say, but it's so saddening to see Thomas's character regress in the Hit era. The arc Thomas went through in Season 1 through 5 was absolutely fantastic, and it mostly stayed intact from Magic Railroad to Season 7. But to see Thomas go from this...
James, why don't you think about something or someone else for a change? You'll be surprised at how much better you'll feel if you do.
to this...
Slowly, wheezed Thomas sadly. He wanted to finish his job quickly and make lots of journeys.
It's just so disheartening, and the fact this happened to more or less all of the main characters, bar maybe 2, makes it so much worse. This episode was absolute trash, no 2 ways about it. I'd give it a 3.5 out of 10. And after this episode we have...
Every engine on the island of Sodor looks different.
The next episode is Emily's New Route, a much better episode and probably one of the only episodes in the Hit era where Emily feels like her Season 7 self. This episode also visually looks fantastic, especially for Hit era standards where most of the time it somehow looks worse than Season 6. These shots in particular are absolutely breathtaking. Huge props to the set designers. Now, of course, this episode isn't without faults. The first half of the episode is extremely formulaic and falls into typical Hit episode territory. Not only that, but the amount of odd railway practices is very peculiar. Like how there seems to be no one coupling the trucks properly, no brake vans, exploding flour, and the sheer dangerousness of Black Lock. Like bro, if Emily had gone even a bit further, those passengers would all be straight up dead. Overall, this episode was much better than the first. I'd give it a 6.5 out of 10. Next up is... Emily's song is decent, I guess. My main issue with the song is how it praises Emily for giving sound advice and being a really nice engine, and yet they show footage from both Season 7 and Season 8. Like, if you're trying to tell me that this Emily and this Emily are the same character, you'd be correct, but in my heart, there are 2 completely separate characters. This song also has that really odd Hit era sound to it, if you get what I mean. It's slower than usual Thomas songs, and while yes, that's not uncommon, it's the way the children sing it just doesn't sit right with me. The next episode is Percy's Big Mistake, a fantastic episode. Despite Percy being slightly more stupid and naive than normal, this episode is still very entertaining to watch. It's much more fast paced than usual, has amazing music, and has great narration for both English dubs, especially this one line from Michelangelos. I don't know what it is, but the way he delivers it is so ominous yet serious. I love it.
The brake van passed Gordon, but the tar wagons didn't.
The crash, of course, is also stellar. It doesn't really make sense, like, at all. Why would tar wagons go on a different track? But when it comes to crashes, if they're well executed and have more pros than cons, I will happily sacrifice realism to a certain extent. I also appreciate Harvey's inclusion in this episode. It's a very minor detail, but I like how they had him clear up the mess and then go looking for Percy. That little bit of continuity from season 6 is appreciated. Now, as always, I do have minor issues with this episode. The main one being Percy's characterization and voice Michelangelos gives him. In terms of his character, he's definitely a bit too paranoid and like, come on, running away, seriously? And in terms of Michelangelos' voice for Percy, it's just wrong. I know for a fact that it wasn't Michelangelos' choice to make him sound like he does, but I just wish he stuck to his season 5 Magic Railroad Percy voice.
Yes, indeed, but just look at my new coat of paint. Now, I don't mind that being put upon me.
Oh, we must get Lily back to her grandpa now, in case the Magic Railroad is closed forever. But how can Lily go without gold dust?
I'd give this episode a 7 out of 10. Before the next episode plays, we get a learning segment, if that's what you want to call it. It's mainly just showing us that everyone is happy to help one another and all that sappy bollocks. Season 2 and 5 could never.
Shut up, burst out Duck.
Call yourself a car, you're a disgrace to the road. Find yourself a scrapyard.
The next episode is As Good as Gordon. And it's okay, I guess. This episode wasn't especially boring or anything, it's just frustrating. Despite what the title might make you believe, this episode isn't about Gordon. It's about Emily taking the express while Gordon does something else. And being an absolute dickhead in the process. Like I've said before, this isn't Emily. If the story was rewritten just a tiny bit to make it where maybe Emily isn't strong enough to pull the express, but doesn't want to disturb or annoy any of the other engines by asking for help because she'll feel bad, that would make sense for her season 7 persona in my opinion. It would also teach and encourage the child audience about not being afraid to ask for help. The hit era was always about blatant morals, so why not just do that instead and make your core female character actually likeable and not bossy and rude? Set a good example, man. But yeah, this episode wasn't very good. It's nothing awful, but at its core, it's a run-of-the-mill hit era episode. I can guarantee you now, I will forget about this episode's mere existence within like a day or two. 5 out of 10. Shit is mid. The next episode is James Gets a New Coat, an episode I've heard pretty good things about. This episode is genuinely really good. It understands James's character almost perfectly, and while it does take James's vanity a bit too far in places, it's still a very good James episode. By far my favourite part of this episode was Thomas's season 5 persona shining through at certain points, and I love it.
Looking splendid is not the same as being really useful, said Thomas firmly.
But best of all is being really useful and looking splendid, like me.
Don't I look fine? You should be at work.
Thomas and James's dynamic is probably one of the best, if not the best, in the whole series. I could watch these guys for hours. This episode ticks all the boxes for what makes a great James story. James being arrogant and boastful and pissing off the other engines? Check. James prioritising himself and no one else? Check. And best of all, James getting his comeuppance and a satisfying ending? Check, check, check. This episode was really enjoyable. I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. Before the next episode, we have to endure one of the most brain-dead things I've ever seen.
Thomas and Percy have to move some troublesome trucks. Thomas is pushing, and Percy is pushing too.
Here, please hit me as hard as you can.
And the last episode of this DVD is Thomas, Emily and the Snowplow. This episode is once again not bad, but so frustrating. And again, it's all down to Emily. In my opinion, Thomas is very in character in this episode. Some would say otherwise because he still doesn't like his snowplow, but I like to think that Thomas will never like his snowplow. And it's something that will always get under his skin when people mention it. With Emily though, this just isn't her, man. The fact there's a line that said she looked forward to telling Thomas what to do just really pisses me off. I will admit it's nice that Emily owned up to her mistake and she made sure Thomas didn't go down alone, but that doesn't excuse the pure butchering of her character post season 7. Now, from a production standpoint, this episode isn't particularly amazing either. There's this really weird snow filter thing put over the footage, and a lot like the leaves in Percy and the Magic Carpet, it looks ever so cheap. Not to mention this really weird use of CGI with Emily's eyes. God, that looks weird. I'm also not a fan of how the snow looks in the Hit era in general, but that's just my take. Overall, this episode is just kinda there. It's nothing special, and like most Hit era episodes, is incredibly forgettable. 5 out of 10. And with that, we come to the end of Tales from the Tracks. It's bad. I hate to start off this season with a bad DVD, but when you've got releases like Chasers, Racers and Runaways, Happy Little Helpers, Brave Little Engines, and I mean hell, even It's Great to Be an Engine, it simply pales in comparison to essentially everything that came before it. It's got a couple of good episodes here and there, sure, but for the most part it's just mediocre. So do I recommend you buy this DVD? No, obviously not. Of course, as a collector you probably have to, but if I was to recommend this DVD in any capacity, it would be the promotional release, because at the very least it's a cool novelty. Now, what's the next release we're going to be covering, you may be asking? Well, if we're going off of release order... Nah, fuck it, let's do this one.